Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There it is, so you don't miss any of our football content this season. It has been, if I might say, fantastic. Our Week 12 reaction presented by Uber Eats gets game day deals all season long on Uber Eats. All right, time for another Sunday hour-and-a-half pod with John Middlekauff, former NFL scout. I don't remember having a Sunday where I was on the wrong side of virtually everything except the Broncos game. What a crazy... every favorite I like, every dog I like, failed to cover. Every favorite I was gun-shy on, covered. Let's start with Green Bay 38, San Francisco 10. So, I mean, you knew it was trouble. Bosa out, Brock Purdy out, Trent out. But as I was watching this, it was more than that. Because, I mean, Green Bay gave them opportunities. I think you have to have a hard look in the mirror. And it's hard in the NFL when you still have really good people in the locker room. I think this franchise needs a complete reboot. If you look at the Detroits, the Green Bays, Buffalo, Kansas City, the Chargers are up and coming. San Francisco is like an old fighter, John. They're like an old boxer. Last year, you know, they were hanging on, had one last good fight. Stop drafting receivers, rebuild the O-lines and D-lines. Bosa's hurt, Kittle's hurt, McCaffrey's hurt. You know this organization well, but listen, Green Bay was going to win this game. You could tell 2 series in. I think San Francisco has to hyper-aggressively reboot the franchise.
Well, it's tough when you're paying all these guys all this money. They've recently invested. I think the best thing that could happen to them, because they're not making the playoffs, keep losing these games. I said it, today was not a great day for Dallas. Like, they're not going to the playoffs. You win, it ruins your draft position. If you're the 49ers, you want to be drafting 7th, not 15th, right? Because we know quarterbacks usually go, and that gives you an opportunity to get one of the best players on the board. They play Buffalo next week. That's a loss. The Rams, they still play the Cardinals. Like, they could lose these games, and I would imagine they do. So, I mean, I think you're looking at best a 7-win team, and I think right now, not winning maybe one more game the rest of the season. This Purdy thing, it was well reported today, like they're not even sure what's going on. Bosa hurt one hip, then he hurt another. Trent's just a weathered, older player. This team, you know what they need? They kind of need to get bounced in the first round. Or, I mean, not even make it to the first round of the playoffs and get extra time off and get to reset. It happened to the Warriors. Remember, they had 2020 was really rough couple years. Then they were fresh, then they won a championship.
Well, remember, the Niners' last Super Bowl loss went
Terrible.
6-10, were injury ravaged.
So, to me, the best, easiest way for them to get players, they're not going to have a lot of cap space, because of all the big cap, hits they have with players, is to have like the 8th pick in the draft. Because it's not just the first round, it's every round. And they've proven to be able to draft really well in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. When you're drafting in the top 10, there aren't really many excuses to miss, like when they're drafting in the late 20s. So I think the best case scenario, roll out the team they're rolling out, and their schedule's hard. I mean, they still play the Dolphins, who look good right now. Obviously, they got the Bills next week. They're just going to naturally lose a lot of games, which I think is really going to benefit them long-term.
Well, it's interesting. I was watching Caleb Williams today, who was he's such a talented guy. Bo Nix looks fantastic. Jaden Daniels has hit the Cliff Kingsbury wall, around Thanksgiving. Even in college, his teams tended to swoon late. And I look at Brock Purdy. They're going to keep him, right? I mean, you can't pay him $50 million, but they're going to broker a deal here, probably in the 40s.
Do they have to, though, Colin?
Why
are we always in such a rush? Like, he's not struggling to put food on the table. He's making millions of dollars off the field. It's an incredible spot for him with Kyle. If you win 6 or 7 games, and listen, this hasn't been his fault necessarily, but why are we in a rush to spend $50 million when clearly, there are 4 or 5 guys in the league that you feel really good about it, and then the next 5 guys making that much money are somewhat of a roller coaster? I would have no problem giving him that. I don't know, Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, 80, 90, and everyone's like, well, he'll never take that. Well, then we won't do a deal. If he would have got me back to the NFC Championship game this year, you wouldn't have had a choice, but they're not sniffing the playoffs. He's injured now. We're playing it out. Like the problem with Dallas playing it out is you knew how it was going to play out. Why can't we just take a deep breath and see what happens? Like, where is he going?
Yeah,
What's the better situation?
yeah.
Who's lining up? One, he's not a free agent, but who's lining up on the open market to give him, let's just say, $150 million a year? Who are you bidding against? So
Yeah.
they regret the IU contract. They have to. If they could do that over again, they would have traded him before the draft. I mean, 100%. There's not even so. Let's take a deep breath. Let's just play it out. And that's what I would say most of my life, up until the last 4 or 5 years, that's usually how business used to happen. Unless your name was like Peyton Manning or LaDainian Tomlinson or some like all-time great player. Most players usually had to fight for their cash. And now just because the league's flush with it, we just give it away. And again, I have no problem giving it to the elite guys. Hell, Trent Williams, you need a boost, I'll give you a boost. Brock Purdy, like, let's just take a deep breath, everybody. And that's been my stance all along, is what was the rush to pay Trevor Lawrence? Does any team regret a contract more than the Jags, like 5 weeks into the contract? At least Tua has proven, but again, Tua's not making $200+ million.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
And the Purdy thing was being talked about. Well, it's the Trevor Lawrence, and it's like, well, if I'd give him $140 million right now, but that's not what the ballpark that has been discussed.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big decision. I'd peel off some of the players. I would have moved off Debo last year. I wouldn't have paid Ayuk. I think they've been a little negligent on the offensive line. They've attacked the defensive line. I think they've been a bit negligent on the offensive line.
Colin, they're not negligent. They've been, Kyle and the offensive line coach have been open about their philosophical belief of skill players are more important than offensive linemen. They believe in that zone scheme that I can take mainly average guys. Obviously, Trent is their outlier. But how'd they get Trent? They got him for a 3rd-round pick, right? And the only reason he didn't go to Minnesota, who was offering way more, is he refused to go there because he wanted to play for his guy Kyle. So they've openly said, yeah, we don't take offensive linemen if we believe a skill guy is on the board higher. The football I was around growing up, with Coach Hill, who came from Belichick, and then Andy Reid and Howie Roseman, they would laugh at that. They would take offensive linemen in the 1st round, and then they take them again in the 2nd round.
Well, the Texans should have attacked the offensive line, not Stephon Diggs. And by the way, Jim Harbaugh had a choice. He took Joe Alt over. I was told he wanted Brian Thomas, the kid from LSU. So, I mean, I think you can find receivers anywhere. I think it's very hard to find elite tackles out of the 1st round. Okay. Overtime, Minnesota 30, Bears 27. Both quarterbacks played well. I'll get to Caleb in a second. I thought Sam Darnold got hurt, came back overtime, some big time throws. Sam 22 of 34, 300+ yards, couple of touchdowns. Vikings had it won multiple times in the 4th quarter, let it slip away. But my takeaway on this is it's not just that Sam is going to win like comeback player of the year. Right now, I think you have to take Minnesota. I mean, they're not as good as Detroit. I think they can play with anybody, including Philadelphia in the NFC. Like, I just think the Vikings are a real team.
Well, their offense is so potent. I mean, at any moment, Jefferson is one of the best players in the league, any position. And how good is Jordan Addison if he's going to be your number 2? And that Naylor guy, I don't even know much about him. He makes plays every time I watch him play. Their running game, their offensive coaching, Sam's arm is just big. So, in terms of explosive plays. And defensively, they don't have, I would say, excellent players like they did in the peak of the Zimmer days when Kendricks and Harrison Smith and some of their pass rushers were in the prime of their career. But we all agree that he's one of the better defensive schemers in the league. So from a coaching standpoint, high end, are they the sneakiest 9-2 team in the history of the league? Right? Because they're not going to win the division. Because,
right,
more than likely, I guess they're only 1 game behind, but they'll be the 5th seed, but they will have consistently played pretty well. I mean, today, let's face it, it took an onside kick with 20 seconds left for them to get in position to kick a field goal. Like they should have won that game in regulation. What percentage time does an onside kick hit? Like 2%, not even.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things with Minnesota, it's like, they were 0 for 5 in the red zone against Jacksonville. They had today's game wrapped up. they're just not talented enough to make mistakes. Like Detroit didn't play brilliant football today, went on the road and beat a pretty decent Colts team in front of a tough environment. And it's like, that's a great team. I mean, I think Detroit, if you look at, they look like the Moss Brady Patriots. Like Minnesota's a good team. The margins are tighter. And again, but I think we have to be honest about this whole Sam Darnold thing. JJ McCarthy's team next year, Sam is going to have an absolute market.
Are
I don't
we
think
sure
there's any
though?
question.
Because what do you do if, let's say, all of a sudden you're in the NFC Championship game against the Detroit Lions and you've beaten, let's say, the Falcons in the first round, and then you take out whoever, maybe the Eagles in the second round. I don't know exactly how the seeding would play out. And then you lose a tight game to Detroit. Maybe you lose by a couple touchdowns, but Sam has multiple playoff victories, and you just watch him, and you think like you do when you watch Jared Goff. Like, he's solid. He's a winning player. He's not – obviously, he's going to make some mistakes. He's different than Jared, but you know what I mean. A couple years ago, it was pretty clear. Like, you can win with this guy if you build a good team. They build a good team. And especially what if he wins a playoff game? A starting left tackle who's like the young Trent Williams of the league is gone. So today the guy they traded for gets hurt. As Quisenberry comes in. I mean, it's a lot of moving parts. Well, what does he bring to the table? He can move around. So the Vikings would pay millions of dollars to know that JJ McCarthy is going to look like Sam Darnold in 2 years, let alone next year. There's no guarantee. How often do we see these young players never materialize into anything?
But you'd have to pay Sam.
I understand that, but I'm just saying you just let him go when you've proven that you can win with him. And it's not like he's a 36-year-old or 38-year-old Joe Flacco. I mean,
he's 27 or 28,
I think it puts you in a precarious spot if you have playoffs. I think it's easy. If you're one and done, it's an easy transition. You win a playoff game or two, I think the conversations just get a little more serious, which I'm sure they've been having throughout the year. Because the NFL's it's you kind of live in the moment, I mean, if you're like, well, why, if our team's going to be good, we could win again this year. That's really all you're focused on. It's easy to say the next 5 years. You're really focused on 2025.
I think if you could get a second round, or no, he's a free agent, so you get no picks.
Could you franchise him and trade him?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's
quarterback class sucks in college.
No, I mean, even Shador is more of a B plus, A minus prospect than an A plus. Jalen Milroe, people like, but he's not fluid. He's going to take he's better than Anthony Richardson out of college, but he's going to take a lot of work and a lot of patience. It's really interesting. I mean,
could you give him like a Cousins type deal, like a couple years, 3 years, $100 million, and then just figure it out as you go? And if he keeps playing well, you could always trade him if you like JJ. I just think the risk with JJ McCarthy injured was a project to begin with. I think there was a story within the last couple of weeks. He needed another surgery because of the swelling. I mean, not that that's the end. I mean, we still got a long time till 2025 season, but I just this would be serious conversations, which they're 100% having. Doesn't mean they're going to do it, but it's a fluid situation.
The NFL season's rolling along. The contenders are separating from the pack. The one thing that hasn't changed this season is DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports book partner of the NFL. Our friends at the Volume. It's the number one place to bet touchdowns. Fade to the corner of the end zone, running back breaks through the line, gallop 60 yards for a touchdown. They don't care how you get them. They want to bet on touchdowns, and you should at DraftKings, the best place to do it. If you're ready to place your first bet, make it simple. A player scoring a touchdown, just go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, takes 90 seconds, download it, make your pick. Here's a reason. New customers, do a touchdown dance of your own. Bet $5. That's it. And get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big. DraftKings Sportsbook, number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code Colin, C-O-L-I-N. Got to use the code C-O-L-I-N. Get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins, betting just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. So, in a losing effort today, I think Chicago is the most fascinating 4-7 team in the league. Caleb Williams made a throw right before the field goal descended to overtime. I thought it was the best throw I saw today. I mean, it was 28 yards in the air, I mean, 4 Vikings right over. And they showed the video from behind Caleb. They had 400 yards of offense. He had 32 completions. The box score was even. They were down big in the fourth quarter. So Caleb is a pretty fearless kid. They were down to a good team, 24-10. They came roaring back. He had a really bad sack in overtime that killed their field position. Vikings get the ball. Sam Darnold outplays him in overtime. But I said before the season, I said the Bears are going to win 7. They're going to finish in 4th place. But you're going to feel good about it. You're going to be like, yeah, we got the guy. Watching that game today in that fourth quarter, I mean, Greg Cosell told me this week, he's like, that kid is unbelievable. Like, nothing against Jaden Daniels, but he's stronger than Jaden Daniels. Nothing against Bo Nix, but he's got a bigger arm than Bo Nix. I thought Caleb today had some moments that were just, wow. That's my take when I watched it.
He made a couple throws over the pass you're throwing is the live version didn't do it justice when they showed the replay, and he layered that thing, but it was a Brett Favre strike.
Jesus.
How about the 2-point conversion when he hit DJ Moore in the back of the end zone?
Yes.
And there were a couple other over the middle of the field strikes to like Keenan Allen where you're like, he was just letting this thing rip. And then the USC, the reason that everyone was so high on him, the scramble, threw it down the sideline to DJ Moore. I mean, might be the best play he's ever made of his career.
Right.
The one thing that jumps out these last 2 weeks is there's more of a looseness that feels more collegiate to him again. That he was really tight toward the end of the Waldron thing. They fire him, and you just see a much looser player. And you're scrolling around the 4 boxes, listening to different audio, and when I clicked over at one point in time during the game, they said he had mentioned, like, I just feel like I got my confidence back a little bit, and he's playing that way. I think the hard part, if you're a Bears fan, is like, our team actually probably wasn't that far away this year. What let us down was coaching. I mean, it's been pretty.
Well, look at this.
They muffed a punt today, and they had field goal blocked again. They had back-to-back field goal blocks if you count last week as well.
They led to 2 Viking scores. So they're 5-18 in one possession games under Eberflus, and they're a terrible road team, meaning
he's never
close games.
Eberflus has never won a road game on a Sunday, Colin. The NFL plays on Sundays.
Well, look how much better the offense got when Waldron left. Okay,
crazy.
So we saw a leap. Can you imagine? I mean, look at Bo Nix with Sean Payton. Can you imagine if they get this guy a sharp offensive coach?
You know the hard part, though, is Colin, and I don't know if you know this guy. I just know him from the outside, and I don't think that highly of him. Is partly because you have a business guy in Kevin Warren. There was a segment of Hard Knocks where Ryan Poles was extending DJ Moore to one of the biggest contracts in the history of the Bears. And in Hard Knocks, he's reading out some of the details of the contract, not to the owners, but to Kevin Warren. And I went, that's a problem. Because, and listen, everyone around Chicago knows Kevin Warren, and it's been well reported, Poles and Eberflus answer to him, not the owner. Right. So you have like this intermediary middle management who's really powerful. In the NFL, that doesn't work. Can you imagine? Listen, when I was with the Eagles, Don Smolinski, like there are a lot of really good presidents that dominate the business side, and they're tight with their GM and their coach. They don't dictate the terms of that stuff. You go to the owner, and even some of the owners, once they get comfortable with you, like unless it's a crazy, just you do it. Like I'm good with it, right? I trust you. So you have this president who is going to be in charge of the hiring of the coach with Poles. That's where it gets weird, Colin. And I think a lot of people in Chicago, because there's no disputing, you watch this team. If Caleb's going to play like the last couple of weeks, they're going to be a talented football team.
Keenan Allen today was great.
So I just wonder from a coaching standpoint, guys with options, like clearly like Woody Johnson, no thanks. Wait, I have to deal not with the owner and not with my GM, but the president of the team. That's a turnoff, Colin, in the business.
Yeah, and that man you're speaking of was known. I know 2 people that have dealt with him.
Well, he's a business
kind of
guy.
a ladder.
I mean,
a little bit of a ladder climber. Light on the details sometimes. Nice enough man. My take is, and I feel bad for Caleb Williams. It's like I would feel bad for Aaron Rodgers if he wasn't Aaron Rodgers, but some of these organizations are just a circus. I mean, the Jets are a poorly run franchise. The Bears are a poorly run franchise. And I mean, Bill Polian ran their last coaching search. That's why they ended up with Matt Eberflus. The owners called Bill Polian and said, find us a coach. So, and he's going to go, to his allies. And I mean, just watch Bo Nix play and tell me you don't think Sean Payton and coaching matters.
But that's a good example of there's a guy making $18 million. He's the boss. Now, it's not his money. If he has a question, he goes to the Walton family or the Penners or whoever is in charge of the money. Right. It's really run a lot like a college team would be run, like Kirby Smart, Nick Saban. They're the boss of the operation. It can get weird in the NFL because it becomes so corporate, these billion-dollar operations. A lot of people like their hand in the cookie jar. You see these names that are at these meetings with Woody Johnson. You're like, who are these other three guys? Well, they're like his confidants that you have to deal with when you want things done. Forever, Belichick wanted something done. He went right to Robert, right? This is what we're doing. It's me, you, and Robert. Then his son starts getting more involved. Then it gets weird. And I think one reason I see the Chiefs are so well run is because it's just Brett and Andy deal with Clark. And I know the 49ers too. Like, it's a very streamlined. It's just Kyle, John, Jed York. Like, there's not a lot of other cooks in the kitchen. That's what makes me nervous with Chicago, because you'd be like, they should be all over Vrabel. Well, Vrabel just had a weird experience. Does he want to deal with this now? And he's a Big Ten guy, and Kevin Warren, not highly thought of with some of the football guys. I just, that makes me nervous, Colin. I can see it coming from a mile away. These stories in January of like, yeah, this is just a weird interview because like I didn't know who I was answering to, right? You can see it. You can see it coming.
Now for a segment called Making It Look Easy, brought to you by Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. Today, Sam Darnold did. Boy, did he have some nice throws. 2 touchdowns, over 300 yards. Vikings overtime win on the road over the Chicago Bears. Sam and the Vikings have won 4 straight games. Just like Sam made it look easy, so does Morgan & Morgan. Makes it easy for you to submit a claim. Over 100 offices, 800 lawyers nationwide, and they've recovered over $15 billion for over 300,000 clients. A proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. Morgan & Morgan, fighting for the people for over 35 years. If you're ever injured, go to forthepeople.com/Colin or dial pound 529 to check out America's largest injury law firm. Winning in the NFL is hard. Hiring Morgan & Morgan is easy. Yeah. All right. Cowboys beat Washington 34-26. Complete batshit crazy in the fourth quarter. Just a wild game, and I'm sure you either watched it, folks, or not.
40 points in the fourth quarter or something.
It was insane. So Cliff Kingsbury always had a reputation. Jaden Daniels, I was looking at this. With 5 minutes left, Jaden Daniels had less than 100 yards passing, and Washington had 9 points against the 31st scoring defense. So it was a lot of points late, but Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix has completely surpassed Jaden Daniels for Offensive Rookie of the Year. Like, it's not close. I mean, he's the last 6 games. It's not close. Bo Nix looks confident, accurate, poised, athletic. Jaden's lost his fastball. And so, I talked to Steve Keim. I said, can you explain the Cliff Kingsbury college and professional swoon in the second half of the season? And Steve just said he's a very smart, creative guy who works in the summer to come in with new stuff, and maybe the league catches up with him, that he doesn't pivot to the second pitch after he's brought in new stuff. But Steve didn't really have an answer. But, he said hardworking, clever, smart. He does come in every year with new stuff. But I was sitting there watching that thing today, and by the way, Washington almost pulled it off. But and once again, Washington missed PATs. They missed a field goal. Special teams in this league are, I don't remember a year that special teams decided more football games. They're just terrible. But I looked at this and I thought to myself, today, if you could redraft all the quarterbacks, and you have to consider Sean Payton and the Bo Nix deal. If you could redraft the quarterbacks, would you draft them differently? Forget the teams. Would you redraft them differently?
I think Caleb's at least quieted. And I was starting to wonder, what the hell are we watching? These last 2 weeks make you feel a lot better. Yeah. I mean, today he made throws where you're like, that's what a number 1 overall pick looks like. No disputing. Here's where I will defend Jaden Daniels. Because today he was running around pretty well. I came into the season. Yeah. I know you picked him to make the playoffs. I thought this was more like a 6 or 7 win team. It was going to be an impressive operation, but wins-loss were not going to be what it looked like they were going to be 3 weeks ago. I don't think they're that talented, Colin. I honestly, I don't think their team's that good. And their offensive line,
Terry McLaurin's
good.
Yeah.
Their running back's getting banged up. Brian Robinson's a good player, but he was in and out. So if they're not running the ball well, and here's the one thing, and I always thought this about Chip Kelly and, Mike Leach never came to the NFL, but Cliff's a good example. These spread offenses, right, early on in the season, rapid fire, defenses aren't as dialed, take advantage of it. As the season goes on, weather changes a little bit, it gets a lot more physical. Well, what Dallas happened today? Parsons is back now. Like their defense is a little bit more, I would say, legitimate with him in the game.
Yeah.
And they were just ready for a brawl. Like they got pride. I mean, they got a lot of high-paid guys.
And Cooper Rush is accurate,
for
moves
sure.
the
And
ball.
it was a physical game. And I think sometimes the more physical you are with more of the quote-unquote spread offenses, you can shove them around a little bit. And I think that's really what's happened in my opinion. Now, one stat I saw on the Denver game is Bo Nix hasn't turned the ball over in 14 quarters. One pass was on a Hail Mary, but Jaden Daniels had 3 picks today, right? So it's like you start turning the ball over, you start forcing things, games are a little closer. The other thing is in the NFL, regardless of records, I've always thought, as the season goes on, like where do you get a lot of upsets in the NFL are division games in November and December with a good team versus a bad team. We see it every year. Like today, who in their right mind would have given Dallas a shot? But you could tell halfway through, you're like, this is a real game. This is going to be tough. And you got a rookie quarterback, and all of a sudden you get
Titans played great. Yeah. No, it's I think when I looked at that game, I'm like, oh, Dallas just screwed up your draft spot. I think to your point, I think we have to take a deep breath. Washington replaced everybody. They came in with a new quarterback and a new offense and Cliff Kingsbury's history of starting the first 6 to 8 weeks quickly, but then eventually regression to the mean. It's time to look at this weekend's tastiest matchup on Sunday Night Football, brought to you by Uber Eats. Whereas Denver is better than people think, Denver's got some really good players. Denver has an elite offensive coach. Denver has a college quarterback with 61 starts. And Denver has Cortland Sutton, who, like Terry McLaurin, is just a big target that's open all the time. And I want to pivot to that game because we haven't talked a lot of Denver on our Sunday podcasts. So Denver beats the Raiders 29-19. It's the only game all day. If I would have bet every game, I think I would have gotten right. So Bo Nix, his last 8 games, John, 15 touchdowns, 2 picks, and a 104 passer rating. In those games, they're 5-3. If a field goal is not blocked against the Chiefs, they're 6-2. Like, we have to acknowledge now, Denver in dead cap money hell that sacrificed draft capital. I think this is a good team. I watched them again. The Raiders don't have a lot at quarterback, but they've got some talent. I think we have to be honest about this. I think Denver's a pretty good football team.
Colin, I think we could be 7 days away from them being officially, I guess, unofficially a playoff team because they play Cleveland this week and Miami, who's obviously got it together with Tua back. A lot of people think that they are alive and well. Well, they play the Packers this week. So if Miami loses and they are then 5-7 and Denver wins, they would be 8-5. Like, I have a hard time seeing Miami catch them. So this is a massive week. Like, I think Denver's in the playoffs if they handle business this week. Because all of a sudden you start doing the math. Like, they're getting to 9, no doubt, but I think they end up with 10, and they all basically doubled their win total. Like, this has been a huge year for Sean Payton. Honestly, it's been a win-win for Russell and Sean. Some marriages break up, go other places, happy as hell with your separate significant others. That's how it's worked out here. So it was never going to work. You thought it. We all thought it. Anyone with a brain that knows these two personalities, even if you don't know them personally, you're like, this isn't going to work. And they broke up, and it's gone well for both, right? And Sean Payton, I think, was pretty lucky that there was 6 quarterbacks in the because a lot of them were going high, and it just happened to be a very unique draft because it's not like they were drafted 4th, right? So he needed some of the stuff was out of his control, and it worked out perfectly. The type guy that he would like is the last guy off the board in the top 15. I mean, it was a historic draft, right? 6 guys go in the top 12, 13 picks. We might never see that again.
And Denver has, in 9 of the last 12 games, and this is so big for a rookie quarterback, they've held opponents under 20. So when Bo Nix maybe struggles today a little bit in a couple of drives, they're not giving up points.
Their DBs are good. I mean, every time I look up, obviously Surtain's good. They have all these other guys. This is why Vance Joseph, which Sean deserves credit for, because you give up 70 points in a game. I would have been like, Sean, you might have to fire this guy by midseason. Stick it out by the end of the year. Last year, they're playing good defense. This year, I think that has to be the most surprise unit of the league. They feel just on the eye test, one of the best defenses in the league. I know Gardner Minshew today, but the score was a little closer. Like, I never once crossed my mind that the Raiders were going to win that game today.
No, but they've been doing this now for 2 months. I mean, go to the Kansas City game. They outplayed the Kansas City Chiefs. And so on the road. That's
where I think, depending on how this Denver more than likely would probably be the 7 seed, though Baltimore, Baltimore already has 4 losses. But if you're telling me 2 of the 3 wild cards are Denver and the Chargers, like anytime you play your wild card weekend, you're playing an excellent defense, like you could lose. This is not a 3-7 game series. All of a sudden you have a shitty half. You're down 14-3 in the third quarter. We've seen this every year. So you got 2 teams separate from, obviously, Herbert's, an elite player, but even with a rookie quarterback, we have seen rookie quarterbacks have success in the playoffs because they don't have to do that much. And that's kind of, Bo Nix, as long as he didn't turn the ball over and their defense played a high-level game, well, why couldn't they win it 17-14 or 15-13? They're very comfortable playing that way.
Think about this, and I watched them today. Sean Payton does such a good job of 2 things: defining. He gives Bo Nix about 8 layups. He gives him a lot of easy stuff. And then Bo Nix deserves credit because he is constantly seeking Cortland Sutton. And Cortland Sutton is a basketball player with a helmet. I mean, he's big. Oh, in the corner. Jesus. Big, long, athletic. I've always liked Cortland Sutton. So, and Mims it can be a burner. I like their backs. But you can see he gets Bo Nix easy stuff, and then Bo, like Russell does with George Pickens, Bo just attacks Cortland Sutton. But take out Andy Reid. Just take Andy Reid out. Belichick's now not coaching. On any given Sunday, I'd argue Sean Payton's as good a coach as the league has. I absolutely believe that. I think Andy Reid's the best, maybe arguably ever. But now that Belichick's out, take out Andy Reid, he can go toe-to-toe. I mean, I love Sean McVay. They've had some bad offensive halves when people are healthy. So I think a lot of this is, it's just funny because Sean's done things to alienate people. He's outspoken. Remember, he took a shot at the Jets. He was right, by the way. He took a shot at Nat Hackett. He was right, by the way. But when you lead with your chin, you offend a lot of people. You cannot watch Denver and not see the coaching. I mean, to me, if you gave Coach of the Year today, I don't know who you'd pick. I think Sean Payton's now, after that Tomlin timeout mess, clock management mess, I think I'd give it to Sean Payton.
I think it's the one award that honestly, as time goes on, is irrelevant, right? Like Belichick, Andy Reid, they don't even have that many. Andy Reid doesn't have one as a Kansas City Chiefs head coach. Like Jim Harbaugh took over a team that won 5 games. They're probably going to win 11 or 12. And I think the way you just described Sean, I think Jim is definitely mellowed out in his older age, but he was a lot like that early on in Michigan and definitely with San Francisco. And look at those 2 guys. If you would have said that the Chargers and Denver, whatever the odds, if you would have parlayed those 2 teams to make the playoffs, Colin, they might make the playoff. They might be resting starters by the last week of the season. And it's not a coincidence that those guys, here's the other thing. And Sean, once he hired Dennis Allen, their defense was excellent the last 3 or 4 years with the Saints. Jim, both offensive guys, former quarterbacks, value defense and will pay for it and invest in it. And that really matters. And I don't think it's shocking. And this is why you're watching the Raiders today. You're like, can you imagine being the redhead stepchild of your division when you're in that, with those 3 coaches? Like, what do you even do? Like, you better hope Belichick picks up your call this offseason, because if he doesn't, you got no shot.
That was this week's Sunday Night Football, brought to you by Uber Eats as the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Uber Eats has the best game day deals all season long. Order now for game day. So we're talking about that division. Let's talk Chiefs 30, Panthers 27. Again, the margins are thinner. Their defense is not as good as last year. Their red zone offense is struggling. And then they get the ball. Mahomes makes that great scramble down the left sideline, and you're like, it's really interesting watching them. I don't think we're giving Kansas City credit for this. It's virtually impossible to win back-to-back titles, even if you have Brady and Belichick in their prime. To win back-to-back and be going for a third, there's only so many motivational speeches. You go on the road today at Carolina, you're an 11-point favorite. And I mean, you looked at the film. I mean, all these guys, you're not fooling anybody. But I think Kansas City is going to be dialed in. I think a lot of their issues now, like today, do I believe they installed everything they have? Do I really believe that? Or do I believe there are moments now when they're taking chances with offensive players, where they're trying to develop a Worthy or a Noah Gray? I kind of feel like when I watch Kansas City, they're playing with their food. But and again, Buffalo is better. I don't think they're buttoned up right now. But the way they came down, Mahomes 3 of 4, big scramble, final drive, I'm like, experimentation's the wrong word, but I don't think they're installing everything. I feel like they're trying to find out what they are. Is that fair?
Well, I think their defense is not quite as good as it was early in the season because of injuries.
It's not.
But we've been saying that they're very, very comfortable winning these weird games. And when there was more than enough time on the clock, even when Carolina scored and got the 2-point, you felt confident that they would have a chance at a field goal. They were also up 27-19 late in the game. So it's not like it was flipped and they had to have some storming comeback. Like, they were in control of the game. Right. We talk about the 49ers, right? They just ran out of gas. Well, they have been to 3 straight conference championship games and 1 Super Bowl. And then they had a year off in 2020, and then they played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl in 19. The Kansas City Chiefs, since 2018, have gone to every conference championship game. And I'm pretty sure they've won back-to-back. They won another one, and they lost Tampa. They've gone to 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls and currently are 10-1. So it's like, however they have done, it's remarkable. And I watched the Chiefs posted something in Andy in the locker room. Like, we don't apologize for wins around here. We're taking everyone's best shot. And say this about Carolina. The last, I would say, month, I mean, they had won back-to-back games, and then they went on a bye. I kind of had circled that if the Chiefs had beaten the Bills, it's like I might have taken them upset special in that. And even this game, like after that Bills game, Chiefs are human. Like, are they going to give their, like you said, not just the coaching their best shot, but the players? Like, you take Carolina as seriously as you did the previous week. You cannot. Like, these are 28, 27, 26, 30-year-old human beings. But they're 10-1. They are on at equally, if not more impressive, of any 6-7 year stretch of the New England Patriot dynasty of what they're doing right now. Now, if you were a betting man, the Patriots lost a lot in the second in the conference championship game over 20 years. This, you would say, probably based on what I've seen, wouldn't shock me if they lost in the second round, right? Or in the conference championship game, especially depending. I mean, now they only have the 1 game over the Bills. But this is a weird down year for them, and they're going to be, 14-3, maybe 15-2. That's an incredible accomplishment. So when we talk about the Andy Reid comparing to Belichick,
with injuries, they're trying to figure out the red zone offense. They haven't had Isaiah Pacheco. Like, they're experimenting. They don't know exactly what they are. For the record, we know the Raiders and the Giants are drafting a quarterback. I watched Bryce Young today, who's arguably the best quarterback ever in Southern California high school history, who was dominant in college. I ran into his high school coach the other night at Mater Dei, a legend who's retired. And I said, best player you ever had, first, second name out was Bryce Young. He's just a remarkable player, great kid. I don't think Carolina's going to draft a quarterback. I think the class is too weak. I think they think Bryce is better than anybody outside of Shedeur Sanders. I think Carolina's going to give Bryce Young another year. What say you?
Yeah, I would say he's done a lot, like his version of what Caleb has done these last couple weeks, over the last 3 games for him. He's looked like a real player. Now, if you could do it all over again, would you have mortgaged what you did to get him? I mean, I think probably not. I would not. But he has been more than respectable these last 3 weeks. And confidence is a powerful thing for young players. Listen, he's
Yep.
a little small, not a great athlete, but he does have a natural feel for the position. And that's what was so head scratching when they essentially had to bench him, is he was inaccurate. He was making awful decisions. He just looked lost. And maybe
Yeah.
sometimes like you just take a reset. Listen, I think Anthony Richardson, even today, they kind of got work, just has looked a lot better. I thought he looked a lot better
Yeah.
today. Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
I don't know if Bryce needed to be like humbled like Anthony Richardson, but he definitely like just take a step back was probably healthy for him. And he looks like a real NFL quarterback. Now, their team, a lot of question
Well,
marks. Is their coaching staff good enough? Is their talent? Long way to go. But I'm with you. Like, what are you going to draft Cam Ward or Quinn Ewers? Like, no.
Thursday Night Football is on. It's only on Prime Video. Best season yet, packed with big rivalries and even bigger stars. Al Michaels, Kirk Herbstreit, Kaylee Hartung every week. Games you can't miss. Coverage begins at 7 Eastern with football's best party. TNF tonight, Thursday Night Football tonight. If you're not a Prime member, no problem. Sign up. 30-day free trial. Cancel anytime. Thursday Night Football, and it's on Prime Video. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details. Well, same thing in Tennessee. They beat the Texans today. And so this is not a game that's riveting, but the Titans 32, Texans 27. So listen, the last 6 games, CJ Stroud is really struggling. They went and got Stephon Diggs, should have probably addressed the interior O-line. CJ Stroud is hurrying everything. He is struggling. He has a 74 passer rating in his last 6 games. He is really struggling. But I watched Will Levis today, and my take is with Bryce Young and Will Levis, I'm just keeping him. I'm giving him another year. I mean, hell, the Giants paid Daniel Jones. I don't think Daniel's as natural as Bryce Young. I don't think he has the arm of Will Levis. And my take watching Will Levis today, the last 2 weeks, I'm kind of like, yeah, they got boat raced by Detroit. They don't have the same level of players. But I watched Will Levis and Bryce Young, and my take is we like CJ Stroud, and we see what he's going through. And Houston's got better players than the Titans. I thought Will Levis today bought himself absolutely another year. I mean, you can go get Sam Darnold on the market. I think they're just going to stick with him.
Yeah, I mean, Will did give you the 1 pick 6, but he did make some fantastic throws down the field. Something is really off with Houston. I mean, they have not looked good in a while, even in their wins. It's just they looked a lot different. Maybe it was their schedule last year. Obviously, protecting CJ has been a problem, but they look like a lock to be a one and done. If you tell me they're playing the Chargers or the Ravens in the first round the way they're playing, I'd say sayonara. But I hear you. Like this league's hard, and I think sometimes these teams get so caught up on these shiny targets. It's like, let's use Diggs for an example. So you're telling me the Bills, and listen, I know people with the Texans, they like Diggs. But even like he hasn't been a personality problem, but let's just talk about the player standpoint. The Bills, who have been one of the best operations in the league, minus like the Chiefs for the last 4 years, are completely out on the guy. You already have Nico Collins and Tank Dell, who are clearly a good young nucleus. With Schultz, you're going to add a running back. Like your offense is not line of scrimmage, line of scrimmage, line of scrimmage. Yet you go do that. Like I think that's one where you're like, we didn't need to do that. But it doesn't make sense. Right. We should have been extra aggressive for another guard, for another center, for another D tackle. But that's where we're going to separate ourselves in the line of scrimmage. They felt like they wanted to go more and be this spread it around team, and that's kind of what they look like now. They're just kind of soft, and their offense gets shoved around. Today, I mean, one thing the Titans have had all year long is their defense is pretty good. You remove that game against the Lions where they scored 75 points. Like the Titans defense has not been the problem. And now Will Levis, I think his statistics over the last couple of weeks have been a lot better. And what have they been? They've been a lot more competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to strongly consider this quarterback class where Shedeur Sanders is the best prospect. But it's not great. I mean, there's some ego, there's some emotion.
I don't think he would have gone if you put him in this last draft. He doesn't go ahead of Caleb. Yeah. He does not. Jaden's more physically gifted. I think there's, I would say, above a 50% chance that they still would go with Drake May in New England. Bigger arm, cold weather, like that factors in. So he wouldn't have even potentially gone definitely in the top 2, but probably in the top 3 of this last quarterback class. That's not even a shock. I mean, Nick Saban tried to give him $5 million the previous year. So I think sometimes we act like Drake May was just this overdrafted scrub, and they got their butt kicked today. But he's a legitimate prospect coming out of college.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think Sean Payton identified very early Bo Nix was his Drew Brees. So Shador is benefiting greatly. Cam Ward is a lot of backyard football, a very edgy personality. And I'll leave it at that. He's a very edgy personality, not for everybody. Jalen Milroe is not very fluid, big, strong kid, great parents, wonderful kid, completely coachable. He's Anthony Richardson, but better at this point. But he's not a natural. Like, he can make great throws, but he doesn't feel like he's played enough quarterback. Like, he needs a lot of work. So my take is, if I got Will Levis and I look at it and I think, well, maybe Will's not Shador Sanders, but if I've got 5 wins and I'm drafting 9, I'm not moving up for Shador Sanders. I'm just staying with Will Levis for a year.
I think the thing with Shador and the Dion combo, we'll see how that plays out. Like, Shador, at the end of the day, it's been awesome to watch. They've been a fun story, but physically gifted. You say Dion's son, he doesn't run. I think he got his athletic genes from mom, because he is not the athlete. Like, he's not Josh Allen. He's not Lamar. He's not Herbert. He doesn't move like those guys.
No.
And his arm,
nope.
Like, Joe Burrow is the best version of this. Like, that's his arm. Like, Joe does not have some hose, right? And I've heard people compare like that, like his physical skill set is that of closer to Joe Burrow. But I think people think of Shador Sanders that aren't watching every snap of Colorado. He's like this dual threat player. That is not his skill set, at all. Cam Ward, to me, is much more of a dual threat, and he's got a way bigger arm than Shador. Right, Shador's just a more polished
Cam's
player.
got a great arm. Yeah, Cam's got a great arm.
To me, Quinn Ewers, the thing with Jalen Milroe and even Anthony Richardson, throughout the history of the league, even let's say, before these last 3 or 4 years, those guys would have been like second round picks or late first round, like projects. And now they get drafted a 4th, and you're pulling your hair out in year 2. So I wonder if we kind of swing back a little bit and everyone takes, like, would you rather have a huge project or just take Travis Hunter with the 3rd overall pick, right? That's what I'd rather do, or the best left tackle or the best pass rusher. And I wonder if we get a shift back, because you just saw last year, the Sunday night game we're recording before, 2 of the best players in that draft were Mitchell, the dude the Eagles took, the corner, and Jared Verse, the pass rusher, which historically in a draft, the top corner and the top pass rusher don't make it past like pick 7. So I think it's gotten a little out of whack, and I wonder if the pendulum swings back a little bit, partly because there's going to be so much negativity on the quarterbacks. You just watch college football. It's all over the map every single week.
Yeah. Tampa 30, New York Giants 7. Not a game I care much about, but the Giants didn't show up. 23-0 at half, they trailed. The handling of Daniel Jones obviously did not sit well with Giant players. I mean, there were guys that were pissed. And I was sitting there. First of all, I don't think this is even arguable. The Jets and the Giants are the 2 most dysfunctional franchises right now in the league. Carolina feels like they got a little bit of a life. Carolina, absolutely. Tennessee today felt like the win and the way they're playing. They've got a little bit of a life. Chicago with Caleb is fine. A wildly entertaining 4-7 team. I think the Giants and the Jets are the 2 most dysfunctional franchises in the league. I think New York probably ends up having to take Cam Ward. Is Brian Daboll safe? I would have absolutely bet the farm 4 weeks ago. But the way the team reacted, teams don't quit very often in the NFL. I can remember 15 years ago, an Arizona Cardinal team with Matt Leinart in the snow in New England. Like, I thought, they quit. I felt like the Giants quit. I mean, they didn't pursue on a couple of big plays. Is Brian Daboll safe?
I'm going to give him somewhat of a pass this week, because this is a management ownership decision. You don't go with Tommy Chicken Parm. You just paid Drew Lock $5 million. We saw him last year on Monday Night Football lead a game-winning comeback against the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a real player as a backup, and he was paid as such. Well, why'd they go to Tommy? Because he's this local hero, the agent. I mean, let's be real. It's a clown show. I mean, it's a circus. At least the stuff with the Jets right now is basically all just sourced articles written. This was actual actions.
Yeah.
They benched Daniel Jones, and this is where I think the anger comes from, which I think Daniel's, I talked about this on the podcast. He's a good example of when you care, like you put more stock into the person and the character, which obviously he checks every box. He's the perfect type guy.
Yeah.
Over the player. And I think they
Yes.
swung a little too hard. And I think it's a testament to like how good of a guy he is that all the players, the good ones, really like him. But how could you take any like thing seriously if you're a player and the backup all season long has been Drew Lock, who's a real NFL player, and they go to Tommy Cutlets? So right there, and I'm going to give Dayball. I don't have inside information on this. That feels like an ownership decision because part of it was there was incentives with Drew Lock. Obviously, they benched Daniel Jones for money, which I understand. Like I'm not against that. You know, he's 3-13 as a starter. It was over. It had run its course. But then to go to the third string guy who, let's face it, they're going to him for a reason, just like so you can talk about him. If you win a couple games, it's a fun story. And then he's a complete embarrassment. I mean, they couldn't even function. I mean, the Bucs have been leaking oil, both teams off a bye, and the Bucs look like the '07 Patriots against them. And I just think that that's a reflection. You know, John Mara is this really like presidential and regal, like the family, the name.
Right.
But that organization post Coughlin and that final season has been, it's paralleled like the Raiders and the Jets. It's no different. They run through coaches. They have these situations. It goes back to the benching of Eli for Geno. And this situation to me is even 5 times worse because of it's Tommy Cutlets. When you have a backup that other teams wanted, John Schneider wanted to keep him. And remember, the Giants were like, you have a chance to kind of start here if Daniel Jones isn't healthy. But you paid him $5 million, and then you go to him. I just think that one's a hard one to shake. And then to lose like you did today. So, yeah, Brian Daboll, Joe Shane, who, listen, I'm not acting like Joe Shane's good. And maybe Brian Daboll's not either. But this has now become a John Mara operation. Because do you believe that Brian Daboll wanted Tommy Cutlets to be the starter, not the ownership?
No, you can't. No. Yeah. No, I think sometimes, and I think fans are pretty smart about this. I think there's so much information now. Fans are better at betting games. They have more information that it's impossible to overcome, say, Al Davis, the last 7 years he owned the Raiders. Yeah. Like, he just couldn't overcome it. Lane Kiffin pled with him, don't draft Jamarcus Russell. Like, there's nothing you can do. I think Jerry Jones right now is hard. Nothing against Mike McCarthy, but I mean, Cooper Rush is more than efficient, more than capable. The defense, when healthy, he's got some good players, can make, defensive stands. I think there are these aging owners. I mean, I think the Brown family in Cincinnati, they don't have an outdoor practice facility. I mean, you can tell Joe Burrow's pissed. They're not even paying T. Higgins or Jamar Chase yet, and they're moving off Joe Mixon, giving him away for a 7th rounder. So I look at the Giants and I think I always thought they were well run.
Same.
I always thought this was.
I saw it firsthand when
I
was
always
the
thought
Eagles. Arizona. This is just a high level operation.
Listen, we know the Bidwell, Arizona. We know the McCaskies in Chicago, McNair's in Houston. We know the circuses. Kraft's well run. Stan Kroenke non-meddling. I always thought the Giants. I always called them the accounting firm of the league. Even when they won, they were boring. I think they make bad hires. I think Daboll's not the problem. I hope he's safe because I really do think he's smart. They have a left tackle, a coach, and a star receiver, and a couple of defensive linemen I like. I think there's some elements there, but my guess is they're going to end up with Cam Ward.
Yeah, let's use Jerry as an example, though, this week. There was a story on like Monday or Tuesday. Well, I think Jerry created the story because he's 7th radio hit of the week. He's asked the question about Trey Lance. And Jerry essentially said, we're trying to win. Cooper Rush gives us the best chance. Jerry's the one that pulled the trigger on the 4th round pick for the guy. He could easily say, like, so let's just roll him out. Well, it's worst case scenario. Maybe we strike oil these last couple of weeks and we feel good and we try to keep this guy or something, No, we're going with Cooper Rush. Why? Because he's our backup quarterback. So for them to go to the 3rd stringer that's Tommy Cutlets in Jersey, it's like this, what an embarrassment. Yeah. And then to have Baker and those guys basically rub it in your face today. Doing the money signs that Cutlets was doing. That's one of those moments where you start feeling, again, you're dressed well, you look the part, but your operation's starting to feel like the Dolan Knicks for a long time now, right? Just you guys have just I don't know, you have more name cachet with the Maras and the Tishes, but we have to judge them now on the basic results and the actions that we're seeing. It's crazy, Colin. And I'm not defending, like, you can always, when they bench Russell Wilson and bench Derek Carr, same thing, money. We're not good enough. We're not going to the playoffs. We don't want to pay you $23 million. I'm fine with that. But this is not the NBA where we just wave the white flag. Every team, look around football today. Teams are trying the Panthers, the Cowboys playing their asses off, and you roll out the third string quarterback in the middle of November. I mean, I went a couple weeks ago. I'm like, God, the Cowboys are in trouble. Now I think the Cowboys are going to get back-to-back wins, like them on Thanksgiving now, don't you? Tommy Cutlets.
When I'm watching football and wearing something comfortable, my favorite T-shirts are from True Classic. So I got about 6 of those in the mail. They're snug in the arms and the chest, just the right amount of room in the midsection. So for fall, they have long sleeve Henleys, waffle hoodies, jeans, button-ups, joggers, more. And if you're working out, and I try to work out 4 or 5 times a week, they have active wear, mix and match clothing, affordable prices. I love it. Fall is here. Step up your game right now. You can unlock big savings. They have what they call bundle packs. Just go to my exclusive link. Go to trueclassic.com. I'm wearing their stuff. trueclassic.com/Colin to save. trueclassic.com. Shop now. Elevate your wardrobe today. I want to talk about the Lions 24 and the Colts 6. That was my upset pick of the week. I thought Detroit, it was just due for, yeah. So Detroit, I mean, you almost never see this. Had 37 to 22 minutes time of possession. They're boringly methodical. Anthony Richardson, they only had 11 first downs. He only had 11 completions. I think he's Jalen Milroe. I think Milroe is better at this point. But I think the Colts, again, I think with Shane Steichen, they're going to stick with him another year. I just think that's the reality. I think if you draft somebody in the first round and who's only played 13 college games, you have to stick with Anthony Richardson. But I'm watching the Lions, and they didn't play particularly well, and the Colts had multiple opportunities in this game. This Detroit is the most dominant NFL team since the Brady Moss Patriots. It's incredible. Like, because Kansas City's won back-to-back titles, would you be shocked if Detroit went to a Super Bowl and clobbered Baltimore, the Chargers, Buffalo, or Kansas City? And I mean, with 2 weeks to prepare and they're healthy, rolled. I mean, this offensive line just takes the oxygen. When you play the Lions, you will have no rhythm offensively. Yeah. Because even if you score, you're going to sit and watch for 8 minutes. They take all of your rhythm away. And again, Anthony Richardson has 11 first downs. But Kansas City's trying to find its offense. Baltimore's had these bad offensive showings. The good teams, maybe Philadelphia is their kryptonite. But when I watched them today, and I'm like, they didn't play well. And it's 37 to 22 time of possession.
I think the hard part about football is I thought this exactly about the Ravens. I thought they were going to roll through the playoffs. I loved them in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs, and I thought that they were going to end up playing the Niners, and that I had seen them beat the crap out of them on Christmas, and I expected it to happen again. And football can be weird that way. Now, the difference is the Ravens get off when the Lamar pass and him running around ratio gets off. The Lions,
right?
Their defense today was really impressive. It's like, we can win an ugly game. And there was a couple moments where they just forced long third downs, and you're like, God, they're missing players. They're getting injuries, and they don't.
Yep.
But offensively, where they don't hesitate is they got 2 backs. So like their Lamar in their offense is the running back duo. And one guy will run it right up your throat and break tackles. And the other guy looks like, when he gets in the open, he looks like Deion Sanders. I mean, that guy can fly. Yeah. And Jared Goff made a couple throws today on the move. It was like, geez, like he's playing the best football of his career, the confidence that franchise has. But here's the thing. And I remember in 2019 when the 49ers were the 1 seed, it came down to the last play of the season against Seattle and like the Dan Buns 2.0 Dre Greenlaw tackle. They only have a 1-game lead. It feels like they are running circles around the conference. And the Vikings are 9-2. The Packers today, You get that win against the 49ers, all of a sudden they win on Thanksgiving. They're only a couple games behind. Like, their lead is not as big. Same thing with the Chiefs, who've had this remarkable season. They've already been beat by the Bills. They only got one game, so the margins, this is a great part about the NFL. But yeah, I think the Lions it would be stunning to see them lose. Now, where it would change if somehow the home field fell out of favor and all of a sudden, they're the two, even if they won the division, but they had to go to Philly. We'll see how Philly looks over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks. That would be very difficult, right?
Well, I was thinking about this. I think both of us love Dan Campbell and what he's created. Sometimes he can get very emotional. Last year against the Cowboys, he gets very emotional. But I was thinking to myself, Andy Reid's in the other conference. Jim Harbaugh, the other conference. The truth is, the next best team in that conference is Nick Sirianni, and we don't trust him situationally. Yeah. We don't trust him circumstantially. So it's like there isn't sort of a wizard. Shanahan's not going to be in the playoffs. McVay's team doesn't. I don't think they'll beat Philadelphia tonight as we're going right now. So my thing is, I worry a little bit about Dan Campbell and situational football, but those guys are all
same with the quarterbacks, right? So we can, I get asked a lot about your opinions and Nick Wright's opinions. Hey, tell them this. And, the civilian comment on Nick's on Jared Goff. Well, Jared Goff doesn't have to play Lamar, Herbert, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes in the first, second, and third round. He's going to draw Jordan Love, who he plays multiple times a year. He's going to draw, Geno Smith potentially, right? Or Kyler Murray or Kirk Cousins. So it's not even just the coaching, it's the quarterback matchup. Like, you went in last year, the AFC Championship game. You're like, listen, Mike McDonald, John Harbaugh, they have as good of a chance as any coach who's played Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo over the last 6 or 7 years, going back to Belichick and Josh McDaniels. But then that quarterback matchup, you're like, Lamar's getting tight. Mahomes is loose. Well, Jared Goff, I watched him last year. Went toe-to-toe with Stafford in the first round, right? And this goes back to a couple years ago when they didn't make the playoffs and he ended Aaron Rodgers' career in Lambeau. Remember? It was like, well, Jared Goff can't play outside. He turns into a pumpkin. And that was a moment in, I forget the date, but it had to be like January 4th or 5th. He looked good. He was excellent. Had essentially the game-winning pass at the end to ice the game. And ever since, they've never looked back. And honestly, they're a field goal decision from Dan Campbell of potentially beating the Niners by a couple scores. I mean, they had the chance to kind of nail in the coffin if he just kicks a field goal. And listen, we can argue till we're blue in the face. But they were kicking their ass. And so to me, then you get think about this. If they get the home field advantage, as the 1 seed, they only have to win 2 games. And then the Super Bowl obviously is in a dome, which plays perfectly to them. So their speed, honestly, they would probably love to get the Chiefs because how the Chiefs score with them, right? It gets a little more difficult, if Lamar can go on a run or Josh Allen can go on a run because those teams can score points. And if they got into a situation like that, they could go toe-to-toe with them. But if they get into a position where, the Chargers or the Broncos, one of these other teams, they would not match up well against Detroit because Detroit gets 20 points in their sleep, right? And if they're on, they get to mid-30s, no problem, even with guys dropping like flies.
Did you know that feeding your lawn regularly builds a stronger, more resilient lawn that naturally crowds out weeds? Scott's Turf Builder products provide a year-round feeding with essential seasonal solutions for your lawn. They have a subscription plan that makes caring for your lawn easier than ever. They put their expertise to work by analyzing the location, size, and condition of your lawn to create a custom plan for your yard, and they'll ship you the right product to apply at the perfect time. It's easy. By answering only a few short questions about your lawn, Scott's experts craft the program that's right for you in your yard. Visit scotts.com to learn more. It's really easy. Feed your lawn. Feed it.
Rodgers and Woody Johnson at each other's throats. I mean, are you shocked at that Aaron Rodgers and his owner?
Well, let's talk about this.
Owner, and now, they're going at it. You can tell like some of these leaks coming out about Aaron. Who do you think's leaking that? I would defend Aaron of like not doing the scans. That was the story. Because he just goes, these guys are going to leak anything that comes out. So I don't trust anyone here. And everyone's, well, he doesn't trust anyone. I think this is a specific thing. He's already going, but this gets back to Aaron. You had it pretty good in Green Bay. This is what a dysfunctional team looks like. And now you're looking at this crazy owner, all these people in the building. You don't trust any of them. Like, This is what shitty NFL dysfunction is, and you signed up for this. You wanted this. You wanted out of Green Bay.
Well, Woody Johnson, Robert Saleh, they played to Aaron's vanity. They flew out to Malibu. They
Yeah.
got into his house and sat down with Aaron. And that stuff. Aaron
Gave
wasn't
up a first round pick
recruited.
for him. Who else was giving up a first round pick for the 39-year-old guy?
Well, Aaron went to a junior college. Aaron went to Cal. Aaron wasn't heavily recruited. I totally get Aaron, being seduced. Then he goes to Green Bay. He sits behind this Messiah, Favre. I get Aaron Rodgers being seduced by the pitch. Like, I totally get it. It's like these high school guys that go to the G League. Yeah. They never get pitched by a Bill Self or some elite coach. They don't get pitched. So when they eventually do the first time, and so I think the two things that I would say about Aaron Rodgers, one, he got after that Super Bowl, he got a little snarky, a little passive aggressive in Green Bay, and he had a lot of leverage because there's no owner to tell him to just settle down. There's no owner. And I felt Favre and Aaron Rodgers couldn't be different people. But in the end, for both of them at Green Bay, there wasn't an owner to sit them down and say, you want to be here or not. And they kind of manipulated Gutekunst or whoever the GM was during Favre. They kind of, Mark Murphy was there, but I always call it the Green Bay Packer quarterback syndrome. There's no owner to call you out on your stuff. And so I think Aaron, got seduced, and then he goes to New York and he figures, they got a good roster, like Brady in Tampa. They got a good roster. The Saleh's a good-looking guy from the Niners. So that's the first lesson. The second thing, though, we have to be completely upfront about here is I'm just going to start naming quarterbacks in their prime in the NFL. Okay, Mahomes, Allen, Herbert, Lamar, Goff, Sam Darnold, frankly, right now.
Jalen Hurts,
Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, who didn't play well today. He's not close to those guys, John. Jordan Love is probably a year away from being in his prime because remember, he sat for years. Aaron doesn't look like Justin Herbert. He doesn't look like any of those guys. He doesn't. Geno made some big off-script plays today against Arizona. Like, Aaron is, the other day I was just writing down names. I was sitting here at home, watching something. I'm writing down names. I got to about 17 and I'm like, that's kind of what he is, right? Like, we got to be honest. The grass isn't always greener. And another thing I was told years ago about Aaron, he's not a grinder like Drew Brees in the offseason. You can tell, John, forget football players. You can tell when somebody takes care of themselves in life. You can see if they've had too much to drink in their life. You can see the ruddy complexion. You can see when people are overweight. You can see when people haven't taken care of things. You can walk up and, look somebody up and down in 30 seconds and say they've lived hard. They've drank too much. They've eaten poorly. Aaron did not have a reputation. Who's aging well? Brady aged well. Breeze lost his arm, but, aged well. Big Ben did not, right? And so I think with Aaron, he's aged very quickly. And part of it was his off seasons were Aaron's. He worked out, but he wasn't a grinder. He wasn't obsessed with it like Peyton Manning. And again, I'm not saying Mahomes can't get a dad bod for 3 weeks and shut it down, but I think Aaron has aged poorly. I think he's aged very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that injury last year accelerated the process at an exponential rate. And this year you got a guy that, is probably a couple feet away from being out of the league. So these stories, whether they, him and Woody, they end up cutting him or the season just plays out, I don't think he has other options. And a lot of other players always say, well, he's got this resume at 40, 41 years old, make a lot of money, the headaches now. I think, I'm not saying that it's a 100%, no one touches him, but it falls off quick, right? And I think once you get this reputation, there's a lot more quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, would I rather have Sam Darnold for $15, $20 million or take a chance on Aaron Rodgers, especially if I'm a new coach, right? Some of these coaches that it's my first year, like, let's just settle everything down. And I think it's proven that Aaron's not a settle everything down type of guy.
Okay, I want to spend 10 minutes on college football. So, my prediction before the year was Ohio State would lose at Autzen Stadium, would play Oregon again and beat them, and would play in the national championship against the Texas Longhorns. So, right now, Texas and Ohio State, in my opinion, look like the two best teams, along with Oregon. Notre Dame, Penn State, also very, very good. So again, it's big brands. You could put 74 teams in this tournament. It just doesn't matter. College football, even more than college basketball, because you have to have depth in football because there's a regulated level of violence. I think Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon feel like the best teams. I thought it was interesting against Indiana. I thought the game would be close. I like the Buckeyes close. I thought it was a real moment where everybody was selling me BYU. No, everybody is selling me Indiana. They looked nervous. I mean, the special teams gaffes, they didn't have the power. They didn't have the arsenal. They looked nervous. And it was funny. Josh Howard got some crap as they were rolling to a win. Cignetti's the coach. Yeah, Will Howard, who's a good quarterback. I don't know if he's an NFL guy, but he's a good quarterback, big kid.
Make some plays. You're like,
I like him.
Into this,
Yeah, I kind of like him. Somebody probably drafts him. He's hard to evaluate because their O-lines historically, not this O-line, but they've got NFL high round receivers and running backs. So he's a hard guy. And Ohio State has so much better personnel than everybody in the conference, but Michigan and Penn State on an annual basis. Now Oregon has their kind of level of talent. But it was funny watching Indiana get up there, and some people were bothered by this gesture Will Howard did at the end. And it's really funny. I'm like, guys, Indiana came into that game, and for a team that has never won a huge college football game in my life, I thought came in with a lot of attitude and a lot of bravado. And I had no problem with Will Howard's gesture at all. And it's like, if you're going to come into the ring against the perennial world champ, okay, and you're talking shit, then if they do a little gesture, I don't want to hear about it. And Colin, you didn't like Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield did about 9 different gestures at Oklahoma. This was Will Howard 2 seconds. But I kind of found myself, I thought Indiana was obnoxious, a little cocky coming into the game.
Yeah, well, it starts with the coach. I mean, he's got a big opinion of himself. And the second half looked like the little kids versus the big kids. And if all these other teams hadn't lost as the day went on, I would have had no problem leaving Indiana at home. Listen, I didn't go to one of these schools like I'm a Big Ten guy or an SEC guy. I'm just an unbiased lover of college football. Anyone making the argument, just watch the games with your eyes. We have the evidence of the NFL draft picks where all the talent is. I'm watching the SEC games on the road. Oklahoma, I'm sure they got 5 or 6 guys on defense that are going to be drafted. And these environments on the road are so hard in the SEC. If you put Indiana in the SEC, I think they struggle to sniff 8 wins. I think they get rolled. Yeah. And obviously they benefited this year from playing nobody. They're a great story, and I appreciate it. But up until all these other teams with 2 losses lost last night, I would not have cried for them if they didn't get the invite to the dance. Now, just because of record, they probably will. But I would bet on them to be one and done and see it. And listen, listen, I know you talk to Clad a lot. I can't fathom watching all these games and thinking the Big Ten talent. And they're 6-6 and they're 6-6. Well, just watch the 2-team play. Watch the speed of guys on defense at Auburn, who's I don't even know what their record is. They're going to end up going 5-7. The talent discrepancy between them and Wisconsin on defense is fucking wider than the Grand Canyon. And yet we argue this every year. It's like, guys, take a deep breath. Let's just watch the games and go no one says that about the Big 12. We all acknowledge, the Big 12 is a fun conference, but it's not that talented. But we always argue the Big 10 and the SEC. Well, if you removed Oregon, the Big 10 would be terrible this year. And let's face it, that's not a Big 10 team. You guys just got them this year. So it's like Ohio State's carrying you. The rest of your conference, talent-wise, looks down. I watched the SEC, and I get it. They got a lot of 3 and 4 loss teams. The talent on their teams is night and it's just harder to play more talented teams. On top of that, because of the television networks now, they're playing all these night games, these road night games against a bunch of NFL defenders is way more difficult than the Big Ten. Is that even arguable this year?
No, I mean, I watched Oklahoma. I thought they played a perfect football game against Alabama. They just were well coached. They were buttoned up. Their quarterback had movement. They were they gave Alabama some fits. I mean, I watched that game and I was like,
But they're
Jesus,
good on defense. They have
Oklahoma.
NFL guys on defense. Well, Venables,
Yes.
Coach Clemson, a bunch of pros, like he knows what it looks like. Offense is going to be a problem for him, but no one's going to argue that Venables and his defense is going to be good. And they handled Oklahoma.
No,
I thought the same thing about Auburn. I'm like, I don't know most of these players on Auburn. Shit, they sure look good to me.
And you're a former NFL scout.
Doesn't that jump out sometimes when you watch these SEC games, even when their records like 6-6? You're like, listen, I know they're struggling to win games, but they got talent on the roster.
If it doesn't really matter how many, I mean, I think Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Notre Dame, and like a Georgia, Ole Miss. I don't really buy Penn State.
See, they're
they
because they didn't play anybody, and they only had the one tough game.
Right.
And Ole Miss,
and they're lucky because
Ole Miss is out.
Washington,
right? But if you told me Ole Miss played Penn State on a neutral field, I'm taking Ole Miss.
So am I. And I think Jackson Dart actually is going to be like a second round pick. So I mean, they have the better quarterback. It was funny.
Florida's a good example, aren't they? I'm watching them, and I'm like, if you put them in if they made the 12-team tournament right now, and they were playing Penn State in the first round, where's most of the money coming in on that game? On Lagway, if he's healthy, on Florida, right? And if you told me Florida played Notre Dame, like, I'm not saying that Florida would win that game, but you can't tell me that, like, you would be surprised if Florida won.
So I'm going to throw this at you. My connection to USC. I'm a homer. So I was saying this. It's not the South. LA is distracted. You're going to be more patient. Jen Cohen's not running Lincoln Riley out. The boosters aren't going to step up and pay him the $70 million he's owed or whatever it is. They're building a $300 million facility. The NIL collective at USC is $13 million. They're not writing another check for Lincoln Riley. But I was texting somebody inside USC athletic department. I said, if you beat Penn State in overtime this year, and you had the opportunity, overtime at the Coliseum, I said you would have beaten LSU, Penn State, your rival, with 9 returners on offense. If you just go get a quarterback like Oregon did in the portal, you bring back the entire offensive line outside of center, all of your receivers, all of your tight ends, and you had a very good recruiting class last year, defensive line, the best they've had since Pete Carroll, but they all redshirted. And I'm like, you're a quarterback and maybe a defensive tackle and a corner away from being really interesting. And somebody said, hey, thanks for the optimism. And I'm like, no, that's what you really are. Like with Brian Kelly, I don't know what I get week to week. USC's games, John, they all look the exact same. They lead in the fourth quarter. I mean, take the Michigan game out where it felt like they were playing from behind. They were playing chase. Every game looks the same. They just don't, they're not good enough at quarterback, and they're too young on the offensive line to seal it. But I was talking to a friend about this, and he's in the South, and I said, it's just different out here. It's not the beginning and end. No boosters writing a $50 million check for Lincoln Riley. They just paid $300 million for facilities. And I said, when I look at coaching, I said, do I get the same kind of team every week? Brian Kelly's a bit of a mess, and he's not really likable. People like, the players like Lincoln. They're not a lot of guys transferring. The coaches like him. He built a nice staff. So my take on USC is the advantage to being non-SEC is you get another year to 2. Shit, they kept Clay Helton around forever, and he was over his skis. Your thought on USC?
I would fall under the USC guy that you texted that you're a lot more optimistic than me. I mean, they're probably going to get killed this week, right, and be 6-6.
Yes.
So last year was a devastating year for Lincoln, right? It was not thought of highly, and they had a better record than this year, right? In a conference too that was really down. So you look back to Michigan and Minnesota. Minnesota's actually pretty good on defense.
Well, Washington's in a rebuild, Michigan's in a rebuild, and UCLA's in a rebuild.
The thing. Like, let's use Texas analogy with Sark. Sark started just buying sweet players. And maybe it's more just the Texas boosters and it's a little more aggressive there with football. Like, they knew they were going to the SEC. They have cared for a while. They've been dying for, like, make money legal, right? They were lined up. I wonder if USC, so far removed from Pete, has the same aggression. Like, if there are 6 or 7 guys that can immediately change your organization or your program, Caleb Downs, I saw you tweeting about him yesterday, who's immediately transfer portal, and really probably 3 teams put all their chips in the middle table. It's probably Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, right? Well, can USC start swimming in that end of the pool? Because I do understand if I'm a USC guy or a booster or someone around the program, like a liner, I go, well, I know for a fact, given the rules that are at play now, when we were here with Pete, we would have Caleb Downs. Maybe we don't get him, but he's definitely taking a visit and having long conversations with all of us. And it doesn't even feel like USC's dealing in that. And like the slow build, like there aren't slow builds anymore. You can quick flip it. And that's why everyone's down on Brian Kelly. It's like, you guys are in year 3. What's going on here? Right. And that's where I wonder if Lincoln, is he going to recruit hard enough? Is he going to be able to do that in terms of like, listen, I'm not an Ohio State guy, but I do respect whoever the Caleb Downs is this offseason. You bet your ass that it's Sark and Ryan Day on the phone with that kid because they got the money. Well, does Lincoln not have them? And Dan Lanning.
Well, the knock on Lincoln, and I think it's fair, he doesn't recruit Southern California well. He has not engendered himself to Southern California coaches. He can be prickly and precious and sort of, he's a small town guy. Sometimes he feels aloof, and that does not work.
Do they care
in
enough?
High school recruiting?
Look at Michigan's a good example, right? They had Harbaugh, and they got that taste the last 3 years, and it was incredible. And then this year's couldn't be going much worse relative to what they've been. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, LSU's getting this quarterback? No, we'll rally the money, get Larry Ellison on the phone, and all of a sudden we have some package of $10 to $12 million. I don't exactly. There are a lot of discrepancies how the deal's structured, but we will pay you more than anyone else. Why? Because we care that deeply. We care that deeply. And it feels like, when USC was in their heyday, they really, really cared. Oregon has maintained that, right? From Bellotti to Chip to Helfrich to now through Lanning. Like, it feels like they were. It doesn't feel like USC cares enough right now.
And I think that's fair. I think Jen Cohen, the athletic director, does. Their collective's $13 million. So the people have stepped up, but the economy in Los Angeles is bigger than almost, it's bigger than Canada's. So it's like, or certainly thereabouts.
Shouldn't they be able to outbid some of these, if LSU and Alabama want a kid in the transfer portal and they're willing to pay X, shouldn't they pay X plus another 20% to land the guy?
Yes. I mean, if you look at sports from baseball, there are salary caps, but I think players know who's committed. You can see it in the NFL, like free agency, like people know Philadelphia is committed. San Francisco is committed. Chicago's not. And players can sniff it. Players can see it and smell it and feel it. And I think your questions are what I hear from my friends, and I'm probably more patient and too optimistic. I think that's reasonable. I will say this, and I heard it again today from somebody I trust. The fastest rising quarterback is going to be Jalen Milroe. He can be a bit robotic. It doesn't look pretty. But if Minnesota keeps Sam Darnold, as you're suggesting, and many will, there's going to be 7 teams that need a quarterback. Somebody's taking that guy. If the Raiders, we know the Raiders and Giants are taking quarterbacks. You start looking around this league, there's going to be another 3 teams taking quarterbacks. John Middlekauff, 3 and Out is his podcast at The Volume, former NFL scout. We chopped it up for an hour and 22 minutes, it looks like to me. As always, John, great
Happy
talking.
Thanksgiving. Talk to you soon.
Same. Thanks, buddy.